So this article about Argentina's Vaca Muerta shale formation, right? The sheer scale of it is incredible. I mean, we're talking about one of the biggest oil and gas reserves on the planet.
It's massive, yeah. The numbers are really something else.
The world's fourth largest for shale oil, second largest for shale gas. You'd think Argentina would be, I don't know, rolling in dough with a resource like that.
You'd certainly expect a significant economic boost, that's for sure.
But this article, it paints a different picture. It claims that Argentina is getting a shockingly small share of the profits, way less than other countries with similar resources. How is that even possible?
Well, it's a complicated situation, of course, but the article points to a number of contributing factors. But the tax system seems to be a big part of it.
What's wrong with their tax system?
It's complicated. It's a bit of a tangled web, to be honest, but intentionally or not, it seems to benefit the oil companies operating there more than it benefits the Argentinian people.
Okay, so help me understand this. The article mentions royalties, income tax, export taxes. Where do the problems start?
Let's start with royalties. They're paid to the provinces where the oil and gas are extracted.
Yeah, right.
Sounds simple enough.
Right.
But it's not that simple. These royalties aren't fixed. The amount varies significantly from province to province.
Okay.
And they're calculated based on the value of the oil and gas at the wellhead.
And that's a problem because...
Well, the value at the wellhead, it can be, let's say, manipulated by the oil and gas company.
Manipulated, how?
Imagine inflating their extraction costs or maybe undervaluing the resource itself. Suddenly, the value at the wellhead looks a lot lower.
So they pay less in royalties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Creative accounting. And speaking of creative accounting, the article claims that some companies use all sorts of tactics to minimize their income tax burdens as well.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Think offshore accounts, inflated expenses, that sort of thing.
That's outrageous. But it's all legal.
Well, the legality of it is. Well, it's debatable. It really depends on the specifics of each case. And of course, proving it is another matter entirely.
It all just sounds shady. What about these export taxes? I mean, you'd think Argentina would be taxing the oil and gas that's leaving the country, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
I mean, it seems like the obvious thing to do.
Well, the idea, I suppose, is to encourage companies to sell their oil and gas domestically, keep prices lower for Argentinians, that kind of thing.
Right, makes sense.
But the problem is, these export taxes are constantly in flux, always changing, which makes it really difficult for companies to plan.
Okay.
And to make matters even worse, back in 2023, you know what they did? They scrapped the export taxes completely, got rid of them entirely.
Seriously, why would they do that?
They claimed it was to incentivize investment, attract more foreign companies to Vaca Muerta.
So let me get this straight. We've got companies potentially paying minimal royalties thanks to some creative accounting, maybe dodging income taxes, and on top of all that, they're getting a free pass on exports.
That's the picture the article paints. And it gets even more interesting when we bring government subsidies into the mix.
Hold on. Subsidies. On top of everything else. So Argentina is paying these companies even more money to extract their resources, even though they're seeing a tiny fraction of the profits. Does that even make sense?
That's a very good question. And it's when the article raises these subsidies, I mean, perhaps they were well-intentioned, but they often end up funding projects that rely heavily on foreign equipment and expertise.
So the money's just flowing right out of Argentina.
It's a tough situation, no doubt. And the article doesn't stop there. It goes on to highlight another concern.
What's that?
Transparency, or rather the lack of it, and the possibility of, let's just say, cronyism within Argentina's energy sector.
Right, the article mentions that. They actually give a pretty shocking statistic. Just 4 companies control something like 75% of gas production in Argentina.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag.
I mean, how is that even possible? It just seems like way too much power for such a small number of companies.
It's definitely concerning. That kind of market concentration, it can really stifle competition, which, as you can imagine, can lead to all sorts of problems.
Like what?
Well, for starters, it can lead to higher prices for consumers. If there's no real competition, companies can charge whatever they want.
Makes sense.
And then there's the issue of preferential treatment.
Yeah.
Those companies, they have a lot of sway with the government. Maybe they get favorable deals, special treatment. It's hard to say for sure when there's a lack of transparency.
Right, right.
And let's not forget about innovation. When a handful of companies dominate an entire industry, there's not a lot of incentive to innovate or to find more sustainable practices.
It's like they get complacent because they have no real competition.
Exactly. And then there's the story of this Argentinian NGO, the ACIJ. They were trying to get information about the royalty payments
Oh.
and the special currency arrangements the energy companies get.
Yeah,
And they were met with silence. Stonewalled. No one would give them access.
it's like they're hiding something.
It certainly raises suspicions. I mean, when citizens, when watchdog groups, when organizations like that are denied access to information about something as crucial as how the country's oil resources are being managed, it just erodes public trust.
Hmm.
And it makes people wonder who is really benefiting from all of this.
It feels like a slap in the face to the people of Argentina, especially with everything going on right now. I mean, you've got this soaring inflation, a cost of living crisis. It's got to be incredibly difficult for people.
And the article really drives that point home. It highlights this very painful reality.
Hmm.
You have these companies celebrating record profits year after year, while the actual income Argentina sees from hydrocarbons, it's actually decreased in recent years.
How is that even possible?
It's a complex issue, but essentially, the Argentinian people aren't reaping the rewards of their own natural resources.
Hmm.
And that, combined with the economic struggles they're already facing, it creates this perfect storm for exacerbating existing inequalities.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that without responsible resource management, without fairness and transparency, the very people who should be benefiting from these resources can end up worse off. But the article doesn't just leave us in a pit of despair, does it? There's a glimmer of hope.
Absolutely. The author really emphasizes one crucial thing: transparency. It's about giving citizens access to information, let them see what's happening, the royalty payments, the tax breaks, the subsidies, everything.
And what good does that do?
When citizens have that information, they can hold those in power accountable. They can demand that these resources are used to benefit the entire country, not just a select few.
And that's where organizations like that ACIJ come in. They're doing incredibly important work, fighting for that transparency, demanding accountability. But it's got to be an uphill battle.
It is, definitely. And it highlights just how important it is for citizens to be informed, to be engaged, and to demand better governance from their leaders. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and equitable future.
Okay, but what can one person do? I think a lot of people hearing this, they feel overwhelmed. Like, what difference can I make against these huge, powerful systems?
It's easy to feel that way, for sure. But even small actions can make a difference.
So supporting organizations like that is great, but what else can people do? Beyond just donating or whatever, it's easy to feel powerless when you're talking about these big systemic issues.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to feel that way. But I think the important thing to remember is that, these issues, they're not unique to Argentina.
What do you mean?
Well, this whole pattern we're seeing, resource extraction, economic inequality, lack of transparency, it's happening everywhere, all over the world.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So by understanding how these dynamics play out in one context, like in Argentina with Vaca Muerta, it helps us see them more clearly in other places too, even in our own communities.
That's true. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's easy to think, oh, that's just how things are in that country. But really, these are global issues.
So what can we do besides just being more aware?
Start asking questions in your own community, about how natural resources are being managed, who's profiting, who's bearing the costs.
Right, right.
We talk about voting with our wallets, and that's important for sure, supporting ethical businesses. But it's also about being an informed voter, advocating for policy changes, talking to your friends and family about these issues.
So connecting the dots between what's happening in Argentina and the choices we make in our own lives.
Exactly. The products we buy, the companies we support, the policies we support, it all ties together.
It's about taking that awareness and turning it into action.
Yes. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
But it's only powerful if we use it to create positive change.
Well, this deep dive into Argentina's Vaca Muerta has definitely been eye-opening.
It's a complex situation.
The scale of it, the tax system, the lack of transparency, how it's impacting people, it's a lot to take in. But it's also, I don't know, it's inspiring in a way.
How so?
It shows how important information is, how just asking questions, digging deeper, it can reveal these incredible stories, expose injustices.
It all starts with curiosity.
Exactly. And sometimes that curiosity, it can spark a movement. It can lead to real change.
Well said. It's a good reminder that we're not powerless. We all have a role to play in creating a more just and sustainable world. And it starts by being informed, engaged, and willing to ask tough questions.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, that's it for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us as we explored this complex and, frankly, concerning situation unfolding in Argentina. It's a story of vast resources, missed opportunities, and a fight for a fairer future that's far from over. But it's also a story that, as we've discussed, holds valuable lessons for all of us, no matter where we live. So let's keep asking those tough questions, demanding transparency, and holding those in power accountable, not just in Argentina, but everywhere. Until next time.